I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel and to this new series diving into our relationship issues as our attachment patterns and childhood wounds can show up in our relationships and kind of what we can do about it, but starting with understanding where it comes from. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I'd love for you to join this little growing community, and please share your thoughts and feedback and stories. I read everything. I don't always get to respond, but I do my best. And please know that I do take everything you say to heart, and it does matter to me. So thank you so much for being here. This series is going to now go into a little bit more. We've been talking about trauma and attachment and how these different childhood wounds can set us up. I just did a whole series called Wildly Loved, basically about how our trauma brains can show up in our relationships. And that is really the intention today, is to just go into, not just how we operate in our trauma brains, but how do these issues manifest in our relationships? And so that is what this series is going to be about. So today we're going to talk about anxiety, how anxiety can impact your relationship, specifically your attachment anxiety in a more anxious attachment pattern. I'm going to try to hop around through disorganized and avoidant and anxious in each of these videos. You know, whether it's like one video is that style, or I'm going to try to add them into the topics, but I want to keep talking about how these things can show up for you. If this doesn't apply to you and you're more avoidant, let's say, there's a very good chance you have dated or are married to somebody who has a different attachment pattern. So I think there's always good stuff to learn, at least I hope so. The core of this attachment style with anxiousness in general is really revolves around two main areas that we looked at the research in terms of what it says. And it's basically about inconsistent and unresponsive patterns of caregiving alongside over-involvement in the parent's state of mind. Basically, what does that mean? It means a child's overexposure to a parent's moods and emotions and feelings and adult problems, and just sort of taking on the caregiver's state of mind. It's like it just kind of leaked over too much for the child. The child was really aware of the parent's state of mind. And so this inconsistency is sort of about two. It's not about not being a good caregiver. It's about being sometimes available, sometimes not. Maybe sometimes more engaging, sometimes not. But the core of it is that the infant's needs, I'm going to read this, being sometimes available and sometimes not available, what happens is the parents are often more intrusive, more overprotective, and often interfere with their child's ability to explore. And so what does that mean? That means that the parents sometimes were just too much, and like I said, in the child and the parent's world. Or these parents were often very anxious and fearful themselves. And so their fear spilled over too much into the child's world. And yet sometimes that was a way for those parents to feel more confident. Basically, they knew how to deal with fear. And so if you're, a kind of parent who, let's say, is really anxious and always worried something bad will happen to your child, then what's going to happen when your child is trying to separate or explore? You're going to be more likely to try to hold that back, right? To say, oh, be careful, don't go there, don't climb on that swing. And we need to be careful. But an abundance of that creates this internal anxiety that the child now takes on our anxiety. And maybe we have really good reasons for that. Maybe our childhood was filled with accidents, or we lost someone close, or our caregiver was super anxious and fearful. But that becomes part of the state the child has to absorb. This isn't just my anxiety and fear. This is actually your anxiety and fear. But a child doesn't know how to tell those things apart when they're very young, right? So that becomes part of like the child's functioning as well. So we take that on, and we have to respond to the caregiver's anxiety in ways that help us get our needs met. So if mommy or daddy or caregiver says that's dangerous and they're going to get mad at me if I do those things, or maybe I get a timeout, or I get sent to my room, which, by the way, we're moving away from those kind of disciplines. But let's just say, for example, I might decide that I'm not going to take risks. And that is the whole dynamic of secure attachment, is that, interestingly enough, the more secure we are, the more stable and safe we feel, the more likely we are to go out and explore the world. And as I keep wanting to always remind myself too, exploration is also part of attachment. And that is why it can be important if you're more fear-based or more anxious to also begin to challenge yourself about what would I do more if I wasn't so afraid or worried all the time? Those kinds of things in terms of exploring the world. Would I travel? Would I take more risks? Would I try more things that are new? Things of that nature. So the heart of it is that as a result of this kind of system of our parents who are anxious, we develop these hyper activation strategies ourselves. So we are hyper activated, and there are some ways that we're doing that basically to maintain our security and connection in the ways that this caregiver needs. So we become hyper aware, hyper activated of everything happening at all times. And there are really 4 main ways that can really be hurtful to us unconsciously, and it can hurt our relationships and can impact us. Number 1 is that we have this hyper-activated threat system. So as adults, let's say with more anxious caregivers, we are now at all times scanning for threat, right? We are looking for danger. Now, danger might actually be danger in the real world, but it might actually be more in the attachment dynamic in the relationship. So that I perceive any time that you go to the grocery store and you're not back in 5 minutes, or it took longer than I thought, that something happened to you, that you're having an affair, that you don't value my time, right? Anything that feels like a threat to our stability, because going back to the fact that we had inconsistent and unresponsive and over-involved caregivers with their mood and mind, I have to read everything at all times. That's often part of the heart of that hypervigilance dynamic I talked about in these videos, alongside different types of trauma and different types of attachment wounds and experiences. So I am looking for threat at all times. And if you're looking for threat, there's a good chance you will find something. And because we need a story, going back to polyvagal theory, right, which is the idea that our nervous system needs a story at all times to explain, why is my body freaking out right now? Why do I feel anxious? What's going on? We need a story. And so we will come up with a story. But the story isn't always accurate. But if you're looking for threat and your body needs a story, meaning like you feel anxiousness or anxiety, you're going to start connecting dots and making up stories. And they're not making up stories. You might be completely correct. Maybe your partner is having an affair. Maybe they don't value your time. But that's not the point. The point is that this hyperactivation of threat is exhausting and depleting, first of all, but that it keeps us always on guard. And then we're looking for threat, which, like I'm saying, if we always bring that up into our partner, for example, might create issues, might create conflict, might make our partner feel that we're not stable or not safe, or they can't, just like we can't relax and be chill about things, that we're just too, irritated or stressed. And that can cause stress in the relationship, not just to mention for ourselves. Number 2, we have a tendency to ruminate. We have a highly activated rumination system. So we are going over and over and over things. We have a hard time letting things go. And so we're trying to make up a story. We're trying to make sense of it. We can't stop thinking about it. Because remember, at the core, activating strategies are about ways we try to sort of psychically and otherwise reconnect with our partner. So it's almost like the more I think about you, the more that may help me feel sort of close to you in some weird way. And yet that can get us stuck in a loop that's not healthy either for the relationship, because our minds can run wild with stories and imaginations about what's really happening. And if we take that to our partner and then say, here, you hold all my insecurities, all my fears, then they might be like, that's too much. Over time, it could be stressful, could cause fights. So we're not really learning to own our thoughts and ruminations. We're often trying to also, as fast as I can get you to calm those down for me, see, I need you to calm them down for me to calm down. So the rumination often continues until there's some signal. I got a text message from you, or you reached out to me, or you changed the way you're looking at me with your facial expressions, and now it's softer, and I can relax now, or you're not mad at me. I'm not in trouble. Being mad at you is a common dynamic as well. And that can obviously go with looking for threat and then overthinking about it, right? Making up that story. Number 3, we have highly emotional responses. We're hyper emotional. And so because going back to those babies who were clingier in the attachment studies, we don't really know when you're going to be there or not. And so that can bring up, naturally, it makes sense, a lot of emotions. And so that's going to then be activating, right? And so if I can't manage that and slow down and tell my partner how I'm feeling, and I'm kind of talking like I was all of the time, that is going to probably cause conflict. I might become hard to be around or just really anxious and intense. And I'm, no surprise, an anxious person. So I get that. We can't just turn that off. But I'm talking about how you might take all of this stuff from your childhood and then basically try to, get your partner to regulate your anxiety. But oftentimes it has nothing to do with them. Now, it might have a lot to do with what they're doing. For example, if they're more avoidant or they're triggering. But the core of this is, though, we are already the volume, as I always say, is turned up on our emotions. And that can be a lot for us to manage, let alone for our partners. And lastly, we're highly sensitive to any signs of rejection. So we're not just looking for threat. We're not just overthinking it. We're not just dumping all of our feelings and our fears and all of our worries. We are also afraid that all of those things at the core mean you're going to leave us, abandon us, not choose us, reject us, be mad at us. Even that can feel like, a rejection response. And so all of those things kind of like culminate together to make this attachment style, if it's just left untreated, unhealed, unprocessed, it can be really hard for us to feel like, we can change that because we're so used to operating in those ways in childhood. If you think about, let's say, a baby who was left in a crib back in the day and the parents came and went a lot, the baby's going to stand there and watch, are they coming back? Are they not? As opposed to the parents who just left the babies in the crib, like a more avoidant dynamic. These, for example, would be babies, just theoretically, this is not accurate, but I'm just, for example, saying who they came and they went. And they were sometimes happy, sometimes not. Or they came in and they stressed everything out that was going on in their lives and then left the room, right? Whatever it was, we're scanning. We're in the crib scanning. And so we're looking for all of those things. And all of those things can be incredibly stressful to manage. And so if you want to work on your anxious attachment system, these are 4 good places to start. To work on dealing with how you assess threat, to work on dealing with how you kind of might get stuck in these rumination patterns, to look at how you respond to what feels like any kind of rejection or abandonment, and lastly, how you deal with your emotions. So I'm going to work towards this series getting into strategies, but I want to just start with identifying these things. And you might just grab your journal and start to think, or write down which one of those or any of those do I relate to, or maybe my partner does, and how does that make me feel? How do I feel when I'm in those behaviors or patterns? And then we'll talk more about what to do about it. But the core of it is learning how to regulate your body, how to soothe yourself and calm down, how to own your own feelings, and stop trying to always use your partner to offload them to then regulate you. Basically, you're giving away all your power. When you always need someone else to tell you that it's okay, you're okay, you're basically giving away your entire sense of self and leaving it in someone else's hands. And we do need each other. It does matter. It just can't be that you give all of that to them, if that makes sense. You have to learn to manage, not remove completely, because I don't think it's possible, but to work on, to improve, to manage, and to heal those anxious responses. So that is my video for today. I hope you found this helpful. I hope if this is you, you know that I know it's really difficult to be this way. It really is. It can be very, very stressful. And many of us have, what I'll get to more of, is a combination of these behaviors and avoidant behaviors, which is often a more disorganized pattern in the more, in varying degrees, I should say. But the bottom line is that if this is you or your partner, know that if it's not you, let's say you're avoidant, your partner isn't doing this to try to stress you out. They're not trying to feel like you're mad at them all the time. They're not trying to feel needy or insecure. They just had a childhood where they didn't know where they stood all of the time. They sometimes felt where they knew where they stood, and lots of times they didn't. And so they did not develop those internal skills as much as they'd like to manage all that kind of volcanic chaos inside. But the good news is we can learn to earn more security. Certainly who we choose in partners can help. So if you are an avoidant person watching this video, your behaviors can be very triggering to your anxious partner. And they can work on their stuff all day long. But if you don't work on your behaviors, that's not going to get better either. So we all have a part in it. That's the whole thing for all of us, that we all have a role. There's a very reciprocal relationship happening. And so I hope that helps all of us know that it's not all our fault, but there are ways to heal individually and also with others in connection. So thanks for watching. Please check out my links down below on my courses. If you were raised by borderline or narcissistic parents or some version of immature parents, or you're just looking to heal that inner child and don't know how to do it and don't know how to like truly remother, I believe it's the mothering energy to remother and love yourself. I have courses listed down below, so please check those out. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day and take good care.